It's Great Mondays Radio. Welcome back, everybody. Today we have executive coach Kate Blake, who has just years and years of experience of working with um, leaders of startups, growing into from 50 to about 200 folks. And I'm having her on today because she has this really interesting perspective um, and point of view, some might say, around that we are entering a new era of business where we really have to rethink what business is. And Kate, I wanted to start with this idea of the role of the employee. So we'll start there. But first, a big thank you for coming on Great Mondays Radio. It's so great to have you on.
Thank you so much for the invite. It's great to be here. And I'm excited for our conversation. It's so fun speaking with other culture nerds.
Well, yeah, you're in good company, I would say. Lots of culture nerds in the community listening to this. So, Kate Blake, um, talk to me about the how you see the role of the employee evolving. What isn't it just it, aren't they just people that we hire to do the work?
Yeah, great. I mean, it's a great conversation to have. And, I will start with a caveat that my experience, I'm definitely existing in a bubble. I think, startup world is very different than a typical 9 to 5 big behemoth organization where those leaders in those organizations would be like, no, we just want people to do what we say. And that might be the case. I think that startups and in Silicon Valley specifically are really, leading the way in terms of how it is that culture is evolving inside of organizations and companies. And I think traditionally, as an employee, it's sort of like a continuation of school, right? It's like do well, get a gold star, follow directions, get your boss's approval,
Mhm.
don't rock the boat, don't get it wrong, follow deadlines, that kind
There
of
is
thing.
a right answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's happening now, especially with younger generations of just what our needs as a culture, as a people, I think are adult evolving and changing. So there's more of a request, I think, from younger people saying, hey, this is more than just about making money. This is more than just about whether or not I'm doing a good job. I want this to feel fulfilling to me, and I want it to feel like I'm having impact, like I'm contributing to something, and that I'm on purpose. So in order for that to actually occur, and even if employees of a you know later generation like mine or whichever, they're, even though they might not be feel that they could ask those questions, I think those desires are still there. So we're talking about is the shift between employee mindset, which is really about following directions and
Mm.
doing it right, and that there is a right way, and shifting more into entrepreneurial mindset, which is how might we do this better, even though we've done this way forever. Why? Why is it that way? And is there a new way that's maybe more cost effective and more efficient, as well as more helpful to the humans that are involved?
I think this is really interesting because and your caveat is really important, which is this startup-y bubble. But or and um there we have seen small disruptor businesses come in and change the way everybody does work.
Mhm.
And what I am hearing, and what we're going to what I'm going to ask you to describe further next, is how to let me just say my observation is we are at the extreme possible end of doing things the way that we've always done things, and employees can't possibly be more productive in the current mindset.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that is why we're having this conversation. And I think this mindset is going to be that we're going to get into this idea, this framing of the employee mindset, which I love, though. It's not just employee noun, it's the adjective, right? Like it's the descriptor, it's the employee mindset. That's what we need to do, is have an expansive view of what these incredible meat bags of humans
Human
are,
sacks.
right?
Yeah.
Humans, exactly. Like they can be so much more. And
Yeah.
that's what's so interesting to me. So let's so talk to me about the entrepreneurial mindset. So you've sort of framed it this way because you work with entrepreneurs and you understand what they're thinking about. How like tell me about how you saw that and went, oh, this is useful even if you're not the person at the, that is responsible for the business ultimately.
Well, I think it stems from there's been a desire, I think, for decades for employees as well as, bosses or leaders, that people want to feel more fulfilled. They want to feel more connected. They want to feel inspired and motivated. And for a long time, many managers or leaders thought that that was their responsibility. And it just right now, if nobody takes anything else from this conversation, that is not your responsibility. It cannot be. What we
Mhm.
need to do instead is instill in people the option for them to start thinking in the way that, does this feel fulfilling to me? And if it does not, what would? So we're not having problem focused conversations. We're having solution based conversations. So that looks like, hey, I'm seeing this thing over here that looks like, there's a log jam. There we go. There's like something's getting stuck.
Mhm.
What if we did it like this instead? Would there be openings for that opportunity or possibility? As a manager or someone who has a team of people reporting to them, understanding like, what is the thing that would get you so excited about coming in here every single morning? You would beat your alarm to get out of bed, right? Like, what would really stimulate you? How could we, it needs to be in alignment with what's happening with organization. But how could we get those two overlapping for you so that you are internally, there's a compulsion internally for you to contribute and to participate in a way that feels personal to you? Now, that can only come from every single individual. I
Mm.
can't look at a team of 5 people, as much as I care about them and want them to succeed, and decide that for them. That has to come from them. But then, me as their manager, my role is to say, hey, last month we talked about XYZ. I asked you where it was that you might need some support from me, or what could actually be happening with those things. Get me up to speed. Where are we right now? And what's your next edge? Where do we keep growing? How do we keep expanding you at your pace that feels great for you, but all again overlaps with the needs of the organization?
Right. So, but there's a job to be done, right? Like I was hired, maybe in the future we'll just, hire amazing people and then, be able to go, what do you want to do? But for
Yeah.
now, it's like I have a job to do. So, um am I where what part of my like am I 20%? Like, okay, what's the thing that I want to get charged up about? And you're managing me like, okay, we're gonna give you this thing. And I mean, I find it I'm kind of hard pressed to think about the the world that we live in of like, holy shit, we've got, 3 more features to ship in this quarter and we're
Yeah.
behind.
Yeah.
Um, okay, Kate, go ahead, pursue a passion project that you're right, like that.
Yeah, great. I love that you're pushing back on this. It's awesome. You're like, that's such bullshit. So here's how you do it. So let's say your company has offices in other countries. And yeah, you're maybe a coder, or you're somebody who's got to get whatever part of the product completed. But if you were doing it in from Brazil, where you were learning the language and you were building out, also filling a need that might be happening as that part of the organization needs to expand,
Mhm.
there's that overlap where my needs are being met for, like, I love culture and I want to travel and I want to see places and learn languages. And oh, by the way, that I can also step now into more of a leadership role where I'm the representative of the home office in this other country. And I'm still fulfilling what it actually needs to be completed for the team. Because here's the thing, people are, you know, probably 60, 70% of what they do most of the day, they really like. But that 30%, if you're not in groove with it, it just feels heavy, and it tends to overshadow all the stuff that you are enjoying. And on your
Yeah.
team, if you got your 5 people on our imaginary team all
Yeah.
together, and we
Yeah.
listed the things that we do all day long, undoubtedly some of the things that I do, even if I do them well, but don't feed me, they drain me from doing it. Undoubtedly, somebody else in that circle of 6 people would be like, "Oh, I actually like doing that. I'll do that. What if you take this?" If you like move around the pieces you're still in the same chess game, and
Yeah.
all the pieces need to be there and be put into play,
Yeah.
it is shocking how much you can get done. Ideally, when you get people doing 90% of the stuff that they love, that extra 10% is just like, okay, that's fine. Now I'm going to spend more time actually organizing my day around that. So if I know I have the most energy from 8 in the morning until 10, 10 in the morning, that's when I'm probably going to get the stuff done that I'm like, meh, I don't really want to do it because it's easier. Right.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Um, yeah, this idea, I think this idea of being more transparent, you're talking about teaming, right? Like that's what we're kind of creeping up on, because there's the individual need, but then you're also talking about the inherent work and how you're working with other people. And I think that's interesting, swapping tasks. And is it hard to get people to say that they don't want to do something? It feels vulnerable to me, right? Like I'm like, honestly, you guys fucking hate this. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to do this part. Like, then it just makes you, I don't know, in our hyper, productive society, no problem. I can do it, like, am I going to be a complainer? I don't know. Like, in your experience, how is it? Maybe my assumption is wrong, but, and if it isn't, wrong, how?
Yeah, so I'm really enjoying this conversation. So I think my experience is that everything comes down to communication.
Mm,
Communication is how you build trust. Communication is how you can actually share vulnerabilities without feeling weak. Actually being, showing some of the smartest people I've ever met in my life are the first ones to raise their hand and say, I don't know that. I know all of this stuff over here. I'm like the smartest person in the room over here. This
yeah.
thing isn't
That's
mine. I don't
confidence,
know.
right? Like if
Right.
you're in that's
Yeah.
yeah.
And aligning with your team. And as, you know, I think, especially, I know a lot of your listeners are HR, in the HR role. Having people training your team members to come to you with solution-based conversations, being able to be transparent about like, hey, I don't really care for this task. I can do it for the next 3 months, 6 months, whatever we need to do to get it done. But I'm confident that somebody else who loves doing this is going to do it in half the amount of time and probably get better results. I will certainly sit here, but what conversations do we need to have? Where do we,
Mhm.
how do we start this conversation so that we can get the right people in the right seat?
Yeah. I mean, but we're talking about having more trustful relationships,
Mhm.
because sure, I think if you have a lifetime's worth of, learnings and expertise, you can always, you can say, I'm not good at that. But you started out by saying younger folks.
Sure.
And then that's part of, that's a lot of who shows up to building these smaller companies. Now I don't think many Gen Zers, even millennials, are short on confidence.
Right.
But I don't want to paint everybody with the same brush. So what I'm now thinking about is, as a leader, if everything comes down to communication, how can I help my team be more trusting and trustful in order to be able to say, I'm this isn't the thing that I can work best on. This part of my job, I'm not as productive.
Yeah, so I think it's a great question because all of this comes down to nuance of your team, the leadership of the team. We talk about the individuals and how we are creating group, but all of this comes either verbally or non-verbally from the CEO. People
Oh,
are non-verbally watching for cues all
yep,
day long about what's
yep.
going on and what's not going on. So I'll often share with clients, if you're going to send a reply to an email at 2 in the morning, at the end of it, you got to say, P.S. I just sent this email at 2 in the morning. That by no stretch of the imagination means that I have the expectation that you'll be responding to it until business hours. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because people, they're like, oh gosh, right. They're watching for how the leaders
Mm-hmm.
are behaving, and then they're
Mm-hmm.
going to mimic that behavior.
Because that's what inherently that's what success looks like
It's what
is what
success looks like, but on a more base level underneath that and an unconscious level, it's how we belong. It's how we fit in. It's how we feel safe.
this is
It's
what we
how
do
we
here
feel
in
that
this tribe.
we can be successful because not necessarily like I'm getting the great outcomes. It's because I'm doing what you're doing so you will accept me. That's ultimately our strongest driver.
Hmm. How do how do leaders, CEO as sort of the kind of ultimate of, but there's plenty of others
Mhm.
inside the organization, demonstrate their those behaviors, those desired behaviors when we are more likely to be distributed on Zoom all the time. Like before, you sort of show up to the office and it's everything that you do. But then we talked a little bit before we started recording about scaling and some of the scaling issues. And,
Mhm.
um, not everybody gets to see that, like that, maybe the one leader is in a particular office, but now there are no offices. There are no, it's like,
Mhm.
if it is the leadership that is modeling this behavior, and there's a whole nother conversation about how to get those leaders to model that behavior,
Right.
but let's just pin that for a second. How? There's just fewer and fewer opportunities to see a whole person. To If I'm just showing up on Zoom, and I'm not likely having showing up on Zoom with the lead, like, maybe is there less surface area to learn from?
I don't know. I think that we've got to get creative about how it is that we find connection with each other through this medium. So even long before, like I'm an old gal compared to people who are like, I've been a coach for 3 years, right? Like when I started coaching, people were like embarrassed that they thought they were getting in trouble, right? It was
Mhm.
like, oh, we got you a coach because you're not behaving kind of thing, right? Um, but even so long before COVID and all this happened, when I had distributed teams, what we wanted to do is figure out ways to make sure that people still felt connection. So we would do things like, great, whoever, admin or support or just whoever wants to be like, I'll do it on the team. I want you to go and find the best pizza spot in the town of every single person that's on this call. I want pizza and beer delivered, or pizza and whatever delivered at 6 o'clock right before the meeting starts. And we're all going to actually sit and talk to each other for a little bit before we get into what we need to get into. So the meeting is going to be elongated, that kind of thing. Or having paying for your team, especially now because we're not in offices, we're not in buildings, so that cost is not there. Paying for your team to have an offsite in Greece or in, Hawaii or wherever where you once a quarter get everybody together,
Yep.
because we just need to feel each other and connect with each
Yep.
other.
Yep.
I think as a leader in this space, simple things like stand up, have your conversation standing. You have more energy, there's more excitement in your body and in your voice, making sure that you're paying attention to the nonverbal cues and how it is that you're coming across.
Mm,
If you're not distracted and you're not present, you don't want to be here, then don't be here. Let's reschedule this call until I can be present with you with my full person
mhm.
and open to what it is that you guys want to contribute and have to say.
I mean, so this is an exercise in self-awareness, right? Because you can't do it if you're not aware of
Yeah.
what you're doing.
And and also being open for feedback. right? Like this is another big thing I work on with teams. How do, like the 360 review, it's so expensive and it does not help. You don't know who's saying what. It's all anonymous. I don't know now how to go. Now it's like, oh,
Well, are
somebody
you
maybe
throwing?
signed up.
Wait. This is, hold on, stop. We can't just run by you throwing a 360 review under the bus.
I think there's a way to do it that is actually very helpful. And if you get teams live with each other, like people sitting in chairs in a circle, and you learn how to give each other feedback in the moment,
Yeah,
what I want to see more of, what can we do better, like what am I like, just go seat to seat. People are freaked out when you take them through it, and by the time
absolutely.
you get to the last person,
Yeah,
someone's giving them feedback like, what I'd like to see more of is you being spectacular, and what I
yeah,
think you could improve on is not thinking that you're not knowing how great you are. And people are like, come on, give me something real.
yeah,
Because as you go through this process with each other, this builds trust. And learning how to do it. It's like, I'm not going to give you feedback that, Josh, your shoes are ugly, or what, the only reason I'm going to give you feedback is to help you. And, if we function as an API organization, right, assume positive intent, we're all on the same team. We all want the same outcome. And even being able to say, look, I want to share something with you that might be difficult to hear, but I care about you. I care about our relationship, and I
yeah,
know we can make it better.
yeah.
Look at your face.
No, it's great. It's good. It's like, how do you get a like that? Just sounds, I mean, it sounds right. Obviously, I love this. I'm learning so much. And holy crap, it would take serious wrangling to get a team. They've got to want to, right? Like you've got to, like, I guess if Kate Blake's in the room already, then we're halfway there, right? Like I'm thinking about these groups where it's like the leader is not as self-aware. They're, it's
Yeah.
like I want this kind of culture, and I'm like, and this is, and I'll be perfectly frank, I had a really big engagement a couple of years ago, and we made some really good progress. And the because I was unable to have the conversations that needed to be had with leadership about their own ability
Yeah.
to take on these roles and this new change shift behaviors, it was not as successful as it could have been. And I only
Yeah.
knew that afterwards, right? Looking back, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man. And so when you are saying modeling, when you're saying the leaders model this, and you've got to, you got to build this trust, and you've got to be able to build the muscle of feedback. These are all skills that are so essential to this kind of new future forward business. And it's like, what is it going to take? I'm going to zoom out. What is it going to take us to get there? Because I keep thinking about these businesses that are stuck. I feel like they're stuck in this dead end. And this is how I started, right? It's like, no, no,
Mhm.
no, we don't have time for this. We have to get this thing out the door.
Yeah.
And we're in this cul-de-sac that I can't, it's not big enough to turn around.
Yeah. So here's the biggest untruth I think every business owner out there believes, that it's all about tactics or strategies or skills, or the, you know, how it is, the structures that we're using, like that's what needs to be adapted in order to meet our goals. And those have a place, they're very important. But 80% of the success that you are chasing and looking for comes from the internal work. When you get yourself in out, there's incongruence happening between what it would look like if we actually got there, what it's going to cost me, how my own self-doubt, insecurity, am I still looking for an attaboy from dad? Am I, coming from a leadership position of trying to prove something still? Like when I have more self-awareness and I can learn to say, okay, look, I have a ton to get better at, and there are always things I'm going to learn and I want to improve. And I really like who I am with all of my quirks and, messes and foibles and all of it. I really like me. And I love me in a deep way so that I can allow for there to be space for me to get it wrong. Because when you have leaders that don't want to listen, where I would start with them is asking, okay, this thing just happened. Did you see how the team responded? Oh, people shut down, or people did that, or people did well, they needed to understand what was, what I had to tell them. I had, right? Well, can you see what is costing you, what the outcome, the result is of that? Because I believe you and I agree with you that they do need to know this. Could you consider that there's another way to approach it where we don't have to like right jab somebody in the nose to get them to see like you fucked that up or you dropped the ball, or it's like, okay, part of this is just part of it. We're humans, we're not robots yet. They haven't taken over everything, which means we're going to make mistakes. So how do we then leave room for that and actually grow from the mistakes that are there? And BTW, whatever your team is doing, they're not following through on or they're not getting done, it starts with you. So there has to be some self-inspect, because they are a reflection of you. Everything in your world, everything that's happening out here is simply a reflection of what's going on internally.
Mm. Okay. Let that land. Woof. 80%, huh?
Here's the thing, all of the internal work makes everything that you're putting in place work for it, makes it produce for you.
Yeah.
Okay, think about it this way. You're dating, you're going out, you get dressed, you got the thing, you're shaved, you're like all looking your best, you polished your shoes. I don't know what people do, right? Like on a date. So you've got all of the right stuff in place, right? But energetically, you're like, oh my God, think this lady's going to sleep with me. I don't even think she'll even want to be around me. Like, oh my God, I'm such a loser. I can't even, whatever. That internal talk,
Yeah.
people can smell that,
Oh,
right? You're
easily.
just like,
Easily.
ooh, come on now. No,
Yeah.
like you got to
Yeah.
get yourself right, buddy. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so this is the difference,
That's the difference.
right? Because even if I'm thinking I want to be a household name as this organization, but internally, I have unconscious agreements with never overshadowing my older brother. Or I've had, from a young age, I had somebody in my ear telling me I could never do it and I was never enough and I'm a loser. And now it's just all proving energy and I'm like forcing stuff instead of reconciling that stuff and going, hey, you know what? Again, things I can get better at, but who I am is pretty damn great. I'm pretty proud of what I've done. I'm pretty proud of who I am. I'm proud of the man I've become, the woman, of the space that I'm taking up. Because when we act from there, there is a calm, centered, energetic that people can feel. People are like, okay, I don't know what you're doing over there, but I want more of that. I want to be part
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
Because employees at the end of the day, they don't want to be a cog in the system. They want to be part of a story. They want to be part of a mission that you are so inspired to see the world in a different way. Then they will lay down on the street for you. They'll just, whatever it takes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, a couple of years ago we did some work for a pre-IPO company.
Mhm.
And everybody would follow the CEO was everybody's favorite person. And everybody would follow her. They had a sort of Beyonce version of like
Mhm.
the Beehive or whatever.
Mhm.
And I felt it too. It's not like I didn't believe, but I didn't understand. I didn't, I was like, this is amazing. What can I learn from, it's like, and it was really wonderful to see her uh present in a room of executives when we were presenting the final values, the cultural values that we had done the work for. And she was there and essentially was like, okay, that's a decision that we made. We're moving on. Nope, we're going to move on. That's a decision that we made. And everybody respected that, right? And it was like we made one shift and whatever, but I was like, "Oh, Wow, could it really be that simple? Like somewhat like as opposed to the previous client where it was like, oh, round and round and round and round.
Yep.
And I don't want to do that. Da, 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 da. And so what you're describing this like right with myself, it's not even okay, confidence is part of it, but confidence with self-awareness.
So I think confidence is a slippery slope, you know? Some days we got it, some days we don't.
Right. Okay. So correct me. So you keep coming back to this. I'm proud of who I am, and I'm hearing that as confidence, but that's not the right word.
It's like I like myself. I like all the parts of myself that I don't want anybody else to see. Those are the parts that I actually like the most. Because when I can have full acceptance like that, do you know what that gives me? Is total open a possibility of acceptance of others.
Hmm. Not fear of rejection.
And by the way, this is not excluding accountability, right? So if you've got an employee who you know is smart, they're great on the team, but they're kind of dropping the ball and they're not showing up. You have a conversation, you say, okay, now we're on the same page. Great, we're going to move forward. Show up next week, it's still not done. You're like, what is going right? I would pull them into my office. I'd be like, all right, come over here and sit down with me for a second. I know you're great at what you do. You wouldn't be a part of this team if you weren't. I know you are great at what you do. We've now had 2 conversations about where we were headed and what next steps would be. It seems like we were on the same page, but now we're still not there. So since I know you're good at what you do, I know you're bright, I know you were in those conversations, this leads me to believe something else is going on. What else is going on with you? It's personal, it's direct, it's asking for someone to be open and vulnerable.
Yeah.
And there's a boatload of accountability in there. Like, hey, you know, there's space for you to be human, and there are commitments we've made. There are outcomes and deliverables that we need that we're on track to participate in. So either you're in, come on, get on the board, get on the boat, right? Or, I think there's a saying forever ago, like, with employees, you either believe or you leave.
Mm.
You're either in and you can drink that Kool-Aid, or you got to go.
Hmm.
Like, you can't be that in between, like like this is where culture
Mm.
itself just devolves and gets gross.
You got to believe or you got to leave. I mean, that's not, I just want to be clear. That's not what you're doing when you pull someone into your office. You're like, hey, I know you believe something else is going on.
I think that we start with that conversation, and then it's all about communication, right? Because if it keeps happening, then yeah, then it turns into, so I need you 100% on board with this and believing, and it's okay if you don't. That's where the humanity of it comes into play. It's okay if you don't. It's okay if you have a different opinion, or if you want to be doing something else, or you want to be on a different team. Absolutely. How do I help you with that?
Yeah. Right. And to me, that is individual centric as opposed to company centric or team centric. I mean, it's at service of the team, but hey man, how come you're not delivering for the team? We're behind the ball. That's the sort of obvious management correction. Hey, you're not delivering for the team, but in your schema, it's there's something else behind this. What's going on? How can I help you? What is
Yeah.
happening for you?
Yeah, exactly. Because what happens is we don't often have space in our professional environments to say, you know what, my mother was diagnosed with cancer and I've been flying home to Iowa. I've since, 2 weeks ago when I found out, I've been back 4 times. And yeah, there's just a lot. And as a boss, as a, supervisor, I would say, great, how do we get you 2 weeks off? How do we have other people on the team pick up what we need to get done? Because
Right.
that's more important right now.
Yeah.
But most people don't feel safe to bring that in and don't want to, like, oh, I don't want to, all of the myriad of things that we do to ourselves,
Yeah.
right? There's stuff going on in our personal lives that influence us, and we would love to compartmentalize, but we don't. It
No.
bleeds all over
Yeah.
the one bleeds into the other all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Kate, we could keep talking forever, but I want to get to you have a new a course that you've launched. Is that correct? Called Intrinsic Authority. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so there's a court there. Well, so this is kind of a, I'll make it short. In 2018, when Brett Kavanaugh was appointed to the Supreme Court, I was angry, to say the least. And I felt it was such a huge slap in the face, I think, for women just in general. I think
Yeah.
in our country, we're not valued, our voices aren't heard,
Yeah.
and there's something that has to shift. And it's not going to change from us being like, oh, I'm going to sit in the corner and say this isn't fair, right? If we want to actualize change outside of ourselves, it has to happen internally first. So I've taken this work that I've done with executives, with CEOs and founders primarily, which 90% of them are men. And I've taken that and I've put it into a digital format that's a 3-week course now that is just the price point on it is so much more accessible. And I just like, I think I mentioned this earlier, but wish we could teach this stuff to kids, so we aren't in our 40s like, what the F? This is not how it's supposed to be.
Mm.
So I created this program, and there's a masterclass, basically. It's a 20-minute masterclass that really just talks about the 3 levels of energetic mastery. So we have mindset work, which is all about mastering your mental aspects of like, how are you talking to yourself all day? How are you disqualifying yourself before you even start? What are you considering as truths or holding beliefs that are just not correct or maybe no longer serve? Once you have that intellectual understanding, there's a very big difference between intellectually getting that and then getting it in your body. So level 2 codes are really about how do I embody this? So how do I sit through the discomfort with, having different inputs so that I have a different output, right? So how do I actually sit through that discomfort so that I can start actualizing this in my life? And the 3rd level of change comes from your frequency. So not political at all, but wherever you fall politically, Donald Trump, he is such a perfect example of this. That dude has a frequency. And whether you hate that guy or you love him, you can feel him. You don't even have to be in the room with him. And as we've talked about, if you've been raised in any kind of schooling or education or their typical traditional workspace, is we assimilate to the strongest frequency in the room. And what I think is shifting now is that instead of looking for someone to lead us, we, the collective, need to start bringing our voices and participating, because each one of us have our own frequency. So instead of looking outside of myself and looking, how do I match what's going on? We want to find, what's my own resonance? What's my voice?
Mm.
Where do I sit? And
Mm.
then how do I expand from there?
Mm.
And so those 3 levels of, it's really just the work I've been doing for the past 15 years. And it's deeply transformational. And it helps you fall in love with yourself.
So getting to that state that you were talking about of getting right with yourself and being okay with those pieces that you don't share with other people and aligning.
And not that you even have to share them, right? But
Right. No, no,
that
no, of
you get
course.
aligned with it and that it's okay, right? And that,
Yeah.
because here's the thing, I think the best leaders in the world, they're really, really good listeners. They can hear the words that are being used and they can feel what's being not said underneath it.
Yeah.
They're dual tracking that, right? They're learning how to pay attention to the resonance, to the emotion that's in the room, to the frequency. Are people hiding? Are they expanding when they're in front of their leadership? How do you
Mhm.
actually start paying attention to all those pieces? Because it's very, very important, I think, especially after COVID and with everyone reorganizing around things, we've got to bring more emotion and connection and sense of belonging and responsibility to each other, with accountability too, right? It's not like this is group therapy, but it's really, how do I be emotionally responsible in the way that I show up, and both for myself and for other people.
Great. Well, thank you. So folks, if they're interested, you can learn more about that at intrinsicauthority.com. And you can also find out more about Kate Blake at kateblake.com. Kate, I really appreciate you coming on, sharing some of your wisdom. Had a few moments myself in this conversation, so thank you. This has been incredible. Thanks for coming on Great Mondays Radio.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. And I'm so happy that you're doing this. So thanks for having me.